Hi there, welcome to our channel. Did you know, sexuality in the Aztec Empire was actually even more repressed than Puritan England? Sit back, relax and enjoy the video. Aztec sexuality and their cultural attitudes toward it were fairly repressed. They maintained strict mores regarding intercourse, and any related actions outside of their concept of marriage were not only forbidden, but were often cause for capital punishment. Despite this reluctance, sex work, one of the oldest and most widespread professions in the world, was common in Aztec culture. Their understanding of the practice was far different from that of the modern Western world, however. Within Aztec society, such work was very ritualistic and, within those confines, accepted in mainstream culture. Conversely, homosexuality in the Aztec Empire was strictly prohibited and, despite being almost unheard of due to repressed attitudes, was an offense often resulting in capital punishment. Though many relevant sources on the topic of Aztec sexuality are unreviewed, the information that is available shares many prudish aspects of sex in the Aztec Empire. Male sacrifices were given for wives. Intercourse outside of marriage was frowned upon, but it was used ritualistically, especially in sacrifice. Within the thread, 400 rabbits at a male sacrifice who spent a year as an avatar, or expla, of the god Tezcatlipoca, who created the world with Quetzalcoatl, would be given 4 wives 1 month before being sacrificed. Female sacrifices were given to the king as concubines. Female sacrifices suffered a more horrific fate. A woman acting as an avatar for the mother goddess, Tosi, would be handed over to the Tlatoni, roughly translated as king or ruler, as concubines prior to her execution. Her end was also gruesome. The priest impersonating Tosi in the sacrificial ceremony would flay, and then wear, her skin. Tosi, as presented in the iconography of the time, was often pictured as wearing human skin. Homosexuality was punishable by execution. The Aztecs' response to homosexuality was particularly brutal. Some references claim that same-sex attraction may have been punished via impalement. Despite these views, references to cross-dressing boys and their related duties hint toward a double standard in regard to ritualistic sex practices. Masturbation often wrought burning consequences. Self-stimulation was considered unacceptable among the Aztecs. As Gary Jennings outlines in his book Aztec, those who were caught masturbating were punished by having ground chili peppers rubbed into their genitals. This punishment is starkly contrasted with some other cultures' practices. Some Native Americans purposefully rubbed hot peppers on their genitals to prolong pleasure during intercourse. Men could be executed for adultery. In the Aztec Empire, a staunchly patriarchal society, male sexuality was far less controlled than female sexuality. However, adultery was cause for execution, and a young man slipping away from school to have intercourse could be beaten, burned, and have his head shaved, though this may have been a punishment for the shirking his duties at the Telpachkali. For both the noble and common classes, marriages were typically arranged by an Aatanza, or matchmaker, and both men and women were expected to abstain from sex prior to marriage. However, as men's virginity was more difficult to prove or disprove presumably, because the Aztecs relied on the presence of a woman's hymen, which can be torn without intercourse, young men often escaped the punishments that accompanied premarital sex. Polygyny was legal but reserved for nobility. While commoners were expected to be monogamous, rich men and nobles married many wives, though the secondary wives were considered concubines. In this sense, polygyny was accepted but was something reserved for the noble classes. Moctezuma, for example, had hundreds of wives. When Hernan Cortés invaded in 1519, polygyny offended his and his soldiers' Christian beliefs. By the 1600s, the Spanish conquerors converted virtually everyone to monogamy. Women were encouraged to copulate throughout pregnancy. Both the common and noble classes employed a midwife, or tlamatquitecitl, throughout a pregnancy. The Aztecs believed that a pregnancy was influenced by divine intervention. For instance, solar eclipses were thought capable of harming a pregnancy, as deities turned into monsters when the sun was covered. Because of this belief, pregnant women were kept indoors during these solar events. The tlamatquitecitl would also encourage a pregnant woman to sleep with her husband up until the 7th month of pregnancy, because if she abstained entirely from the carnal act, the baby would be born sickly and weak. Concubines were forced into celibacy for several years after childbirth. While pregnant women were encouraged to engage in intercourse into their 3rd trimester, concubines in a nobleman's household were expected to be celibate following childbirth. While the children of secondary wives did not enjoy the same social status as the child of primary wives, they could achieve enormous power. Emperor Itzcuintli was fathered by the first Aztec emperor, Acamapichtli, but sources claim his mother was either a slave woman or a peasant who sold vegetables in the public market. Women were gifted to Spanish conquerors. Aztec rulers were known to give women away to other high-ranking men as gifts. This practice continued even after Cortés invaded in Tenochtitlan in 1519, and it was unclear how the women felt about being given away as prizes. Muñoz Camargo, a Spanish chronicler, documented this practice, saying that Aztec rulers took absolutely whichever woman they wanted, and they were given to them as men of power. And, following this usage, many daughters of the rulers were given to the Spaniards, so that they would leave descendants there, in case they should go away from this land. When Cortés arrived, he and his men were given 20 women, including Malinali or Malinche, a wealthy noblewoman, who also served in a diplomatic capacity between the Aztecs and the Spaniards. Some women performed ritualistic intercourse. As the holy men behind historical Hispanic texts were products of a monogamous patriarchal culture, most descriptions of sex workers in the Aztec Empire are heavily demeaning. These texts did, however, recognize that these Aztec women fulfilled an assigned ritualistic role in society. They were known as Ahuayanam, and they were associated with the goddess Xochiquetzal. In the Florentine Codex, Sahagun states the priestesses of Xochiquetzal would ritualistically offer themselves to young warriors after a battle. They were also trained in art and music and would entertain male sacrificial victims before they were ceremoniously slaughtered. Aztec Ahuayanam were easily identifiable. Their appearance was purposefully different from that of the common Aztec woman. The latter would wear her hair up, as opposed to the loose hairstyles of the Ahuayanam. Perfume, jewelry, and face paint similar to modern makeup were all staples of Ahuayanam attire. In the Florentine Codex, Sahagun also claims the Ahuayanam would paint their teeth and habitually chew gum. Sahagun did, however, describe them as detestable and shameful creatures. While he acknowledged some of their ritualistic duties, he failed to fully understand the role they played in Aztec religion. Some deities related to vices and excess brought misfortune. The Aztecs had numerous deities, several of which were associated with sexuality and vices. Usually the deities that fell under this category were thought to bring misfortune. The Ihuiateo were a group of 5 gods associated with vices and pleasure, but they were also thought to incite disease and bad luck. Tlazolteotl, a complex goddess who represented several aspects of Aztec life, was also known as the goddesses Ixcuiname and Chicomicatl, deities that symbolized sin and cheating. Tlazolteotl has also been categorized as a fertility goddess when in a childbirth position. She was later also confused with the mother of all gods, Tosi. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and comment.